Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. I am one of the hosts, Zach, and the other host is Chris. What's going on, Chris?
Hey, Zach. Hey, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for watching us across the world and the interwebs. Great to see you, Zach, and be here again. It's an awesome way to complete our week, isn't it? This is just so enjoyable for us.
Yeah, we get to talk about Star Trek Strange
Oh,
New Worlds. It's a great series. Season one really set the bar high, didn't it?
yeah, yeah, it absolutely did. I mean, well, we were just talking earlier. We were talking about the one of the great episodes from season one, Quality of Mercy, and how cool it was, and how great and awesome homage it did to the original series, but making everything fresh and new again, and the awesomeness of Captain Pike, because we didn't have him really fleshed out. So
Yeah,
great to
that's
see that.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah, that kind of homage to Balance of Terror was
yeah,
really special. The episodes with the Gorn, all this stuff, right? And so then we get to move into season two now, and we've gotten two very interesting episodes to start out the season. And we get a third episode that's very interesting. That's going to be fun to talk about, and that's what we're here to talk about. So, if this is your first time to the podcast, we welcome you. If you're watching or listening to us, either on your favorite podcast platform or watching us on YouTube, we appreciate it. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram to follow us there for all the latest announcements, Star Trek memes, sci-fi memes, funny things, things we share, whatever. We're also on there. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell for notification if you are on YouTube to get the latest and greatest there. And look out for future content because it's all coming down. We got so much more coming. And if you're watching this, tomorrow will be our premiere of our exclusive interview with Nana Visitor. So we cannot wait to share that with you. Oh, it was such a pleasure to sit down with her and spend time with her and talk. And we had a blast, Chris.
we absolutely did. And I just say it's just such there's a real privilege too. We feel so honored to be able to do that and get to learn about our role models in Star Trek, and the people that we love in Star Trek, that are creating this great universe for all of us, and such great like memories. And it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She has a just an unbelievable career across Broadway, television, film. And I mean, I got to geek out on DS9. So, I mean, that's all even better. But what we're here for is episode number 3 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I better start talking about this now before I go off on some weird tangent and
It's
start
all good,
talking
man.
about Deep Space Nine again. So the episode is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. A very interesting title for an episode.
Episode 3, and they had to have 3 tomorrow words: tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, very very interesting. But so this is a time travel episode.
Y-
This,
and- yeah.
yeah,
It, which totally made me think, because last week was a trial episode. This week was a time travel episode. And so here we were thinking, well, okay, in Star Trek, we have to have trial episodes because that's like a
yep,
thing.
yep,
And then we have to have time travel episodes because that's also a thing. And then we have to have mirror universe episodes at some point because that's a thing. So
yeah.
we're like having our we're having our little deep dive, like highlight specials that are coming out, like here and here, that we're seeing in Strange New World. So we could do a
Yeah,
collection of episodes. Yeah.
it's checking all the Star Trek boxes, right? It really is. It's interesting because not only is this a time travel episode, this is a little bit of an alternate universe episode too, and we'll get into
Yeah.
that in a little bit. But this was very interesting. We are going into this fresh, okay? So
Hmm.
Chris and I have not had really any discussion at all about this since we both watched it, and our reactions to each other are going to be nothing but authentic. Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So okay, let's jump into this, Chris. Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode 3 tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Now, if you've been listening or watching the podcast long enough, you know my love for Leon. And this is the perfect episode. And now, Chris,
Yeah.
this is the third episode of the season. And for 3 straight episodes, we've barely seen Pike.
Yeah. I
I'm
felt
thinking
the
to
same.
myself,
Yeah.
like, what did Anson Mount think when he got the scripts? He's like, oh, I guess I'm not in this first episode. Oh, I'm not really in the second episode much. Oh, the third episode, I only show up really at the end. Like, It's crazy. It makes me wonder, and I don't know if you have the same thoughts, Chris. This makes me wonder, like, okay, because we've had so many episodes so far, the first three episodes of this of the season so far that have been centric to other characters, not the captain.
Mhm.
Does that mean that we're going to get really heavy Pike episodes later on in the season? I would have to assume so.
I agree. I'd have to assume so. Because if Pike ends up where he ends up in his tragedy and has to save people, right? That is the potential destiny that at least the Pike we know has in the Star Trek kind of timeline. If that's his destiny to of self-sacrifice and saving people, um, I think just like you, we will have some very, very Pike heavy and centric and important episodes moving
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
Now, my assumption going forward from this moment on is that that event that happens to Pike, right, that
Mhm.
disfigures him and puts him into the wheelchair, for lack of better terms, or motion chair, whatever you want to call it, futuristic version of it. Um, that's not going to happen, I wouldn't think, until towards the end of the series when they're done making episodes, right? I mean, I can't imagine unless they're going to put it somewhere and then something changes and then the timeline splits off and now Pike never went through that. But to me, that would be, I think, a wrong step. I
Yeah.
think eventually Pike has to become what we know him in TOS so that Kirk can take command of the Enterprise.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I mean we'll see what happens, but for me right now I feel like because Pike's um his dedication and sacrifice was such a core thing in Star Trek to setting a series of events going forward, it had such meaning that sacrifice that I feel like if it goes a different direction, then that affects kind of the meaning of his sacrifice that we feel. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope they don't. I hope they keep
Hmm.
that. I mean, the modern Star Trek compared to the legacy Trek or the original five series is that it is kind of its own thing, right? Like the timeline is
Yeah.
there's things that's different. We're gonna see a lot of that, I think, in this episode. But yeah, things are different, and so I am hoping that while I'm okay with some things being different, I do hope that they stick with some of these real significant moments and events
Hmm.
that we know throughout many of the Star Trek series.
Yeah. I agree. I think
Because
they're
then I think it
yeah.
changes it too much, and then we're like, okay, well, now this isn't what I know.
Yeah, because in that case you might as well have a fresh character, right? Just
Yeah,
completely fresh character, and not have to tie it back or have that character be uh, perhaps restrained or constrained by all of the past iterations of the character. Just start fresh, um, and then be unchained from that. So
yeah, that's
I
true.
think it'd be interesting. I mean, I do appreciate fresh approaches and original approaches and things that are new. That those are always very interesting. Very nice to see. Where I start getting maybe in the realm of not liking so much is where characters become caricatures of something previous, and so I'm feeling like no, just make it new, make it fresh. Don't try and copy.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
mentioned that. I think you mentioned that when we talked earlier this morning. So
yeah,
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 yeah. So okay, let's dive into this. So we start out with episode 3 with a personal log from my favorite character, Leon.
yeah.
And we see Leon moving about the ship, right, performing some of her duties. She's kind of playing referee to, I think that's transporter Chief Kyle and
Yes,
another alien character, both random red shirts, right?
yes, indeed.
On the ship. Well, maybe the transporter Chief Kyle is not so much a random red shirt. I mean, he was a character in Toss, right? So, but we see her kind of trying to break up the dispute. Then we see her shift over and we see her show up at Spock's quarters, and Spock apparently has had a noise complaint
That was
against
funny.
him.
That was
Oh, it was
great.
epic. It was in the kind of the whimsical music in the background during this scene. And she says, yeah, there's been a noise complaint. He's in his Vulcan way, like kind of shocked, like, oh, me? Like, he says, well, I shall make every attempt to practice less vigorously going forward,
Yeah,
as
and
he's holding that Vulcan harp that he just got from Dr. Mbenga. And I believe it was the first episode of the season.
yeah, that expression on his face was hilarious.
Yeah.
So,
It,
so
it was, yeah, it was very much a Vulcan expression that you could see this kind of puzzled look in a Vulcan way.
it was neat to see Leon kind of. She's doing these. We don't see these often. These mundane duties that the security head of the ship has to do, and
Yeah.
like adjudicate all of these, different complaints, and that must be like um tearing her apart. Like
A little
just like,
tedious, right?
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Then we flash from Spock, and now she's with Commander Pelia out in what seems like a hallway or an end of a hallway with a bunch of just old stuff laying around, right? These old relics. And I love how she says, something to the effect of like, it's property of the or I think Leon looks at a tag and says, property of the archaeology department, which we'll find out about later, right? And she's like, I used to work there, didn't I? He's like, I still have a bunker in Vermont in case this whole socialist no money utopia thing turns out to be a fad, which I died laughing. I think, we've talked about, for me anyways, needing more of Commander Pelia to determine whether I like her. I liked her in this episode. I really did. I thought that between where we see her in the past and where we see her now, it was very funny.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it was just probably the right amount of her because her right. I think if she's funny, but if you have too much of it, it might kind of maybe tip the scale in a way that takes the episode in a different direction. So I really liked the Utopia line, and that was kind of
Yeah.
right breaking the fourth wall of the episode. Maybe speaking to us was like, yeah, how long's your Utopia and no money society gonna last like that?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that was great.
That was good. And I think you made a good point because I think there is a balance act to the style of this character,
Mhm.
which Carol Kane is really good at doing this style of. I mean, she's done a lot of. She's a master comedian in her roles that she's been in the past. So I think there is a balance, like you said, because if you do too much, then I think it makes her not believable, or the character, I should say, not believable as being a chief engineer, right, or
Yeah,
someone who's overseeing, the heartbeat of the ship.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, and then we see Leon sparring with Dr. Mbenga, right? It seems that she's clearing out some kind of frustration. My take on this is carrying over from season 1 into season 2, where her lineage, right? Her heritage, her genetics, all this stuff of being a Noonien Singh or Noonien Soong. Is this yeah.
Soon?
Soong, yeah, Noonien Soong. Khan Noonien Singh. I've heard it pronounced both ways. But
Mhm.
anyways, her lineage, I think, has carried a heavy weight on her for a long time. And I believe this has been mentioned before about, the kind of the mental effect it's had, that she knows, right? She knows that she is a descendant of Khan, this genocidal, maniac who just wreaked havoc on Earth in the 1990s. And that's weighed on her. So then, Chris, we get a flash ahead slightly from this, her working out and sparring with Dr. Mbenga, to walking the halls of the Enterprise.
Mhm. Mhm. That's right. And then there's a strange noise, and she realizes I got a little confused right there, but then she sees the injured man, and the injury is not it's not a phaser blast. It's
Right.
she's shot. It's just like, oh, you've been shot. And then it goes into, hey, there's been an attack in the past. This injured man's like, you've got to stop it. He gives her a device, I believe, at the time, and says, hey, get to the bridge. And
Yeah.
she takes the device. You're right that Leon, because you can see it in her face, like how consumed she is, how bothered she is by uh, her identity,
Yeah.
essentially, like it and who she is. So she's carrying that, and carrying a lot of maybe anger, like associated with it.
And doesn't she? I'm trying to think back to season 1, and I probably should have gone back and watched the whole season before season 2 started to refresh. But I guess I could do that at some point before we get too farther in. But I think there's at some point that she has a discussion with Una, because Una's like a mentor to her, right?
Yes.
And doesn't she at some point reveal that she was called names when she was younger, like
Yes.
monster and all this other kind of stuff,
Yes.
because people knew, the her last name is distinct, right? It's not like she's, Smith or Jones, where you can just blend in that regard. Noonien Soong is a significantly, that name stands out in history with unfortunately, a really well-known genocidal maniac.
Yes. Yes. She does tell Una that. And so she was, I'm sure, bullied and harassed like
Yeah.
growing up. Which is interesting. It brings several questions to my mind because if that is her lineage, this is what I think both you and I have not figured it out yet. But if her lineage is from Khan, does she carry those essentially physiological traits of augmentation that Khan did? We don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure yet on that.
Well, we'll get into this a little bit later, but there
Mhm.
is a reference later in the episode where she mentions something about genetic markers.
I see.
So I think that's kind of hinting at it, but you're right. That hasn't been flushed out very much yet, as far as I can remember.
Yes. Yes. So that,
So I would assume hopefully we're gonna have more answers to that in the future, maybe.
yeah. It- what's also interesting to me is she kept the last name. So I'm assuming that, people could probably legally in the Star Trek universe could probably legally change the last name if there were circumstances, exceptional circumstances. Uh, so if she didn't have that choice, and she had to keep her last name, then so be it. But I'm presume that perhaps she could have changed the last name if that opportunity arose, but
Yeah.
she kept it. So I think that's actually, if you think about it from that perspective, like interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure how common it would have been back then to change your name, but I can't see
Yeah,
why you wouldn't be able to.
yeah,
So maybe that was just not, maybe she didn't think to do it. I don't know. That's a good point though.
yeah. But somehow she was able to get her application accepted in Starfleet.
Yeah, right.
So it was good enough for Starfleet. Yeah. So she's she gets that device from that injured shot man. He says, "Get to the bridge," and she does get to the bridge, and that's where we see things are all of a sudden completely different because it's now not Pike on the bridge; it's Captain James T. Kirk on the bridge in command, and things are different. His insignia is different, and Leon realizes that something is very, very, very off. And we start to hear Kirk talk, and then we hear it's not the Federation, it's the United Earth Fleet ship. So
Yeah.
something is very, very off. And on the view screen, we see Spock, and Spock's been in a battle with the Romulans. Spock is part of he's captain of a Vulcan ship, uh, and he's asking, which is interesting, he's asking Kirk for help.
Yeah.
And, Kirk essentially says, "Hey, I'm really, very, I'm really, really, really sorry, but we're not able to help you out right now."
Yeah. It's like
So,
we have
yeah,
our own problems with the
yeah,
Romulans and we don't want to, make things worse or something like that. I think he says.
yeah. I liked where so Leon comes on, and then everyone on the bridge kind of turns and like looks at her, like who's this person?
Yeah.
They're all looking at her, and Kirk's looking at her too, and she says, "Hey, I think this is we should talk in private," which is probably a good move. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's definitely a good move, because she then goes to, um, into, like, I think it's Kirk's quarters, and you see, I'm assuming it's like Sorry and Brandy there on the table, because that's would be
oh
a
yeah,
nice toss reference, right? That
yeah,
Kirk likes some Sorry and Brandy. So she goes into his quarters and tries to convince him that she's not from the timeline, which is interesting, because Kirk does mention there's no record of her anywhere. So there's something definitely off there. And she tries to convince him to use this device to help get her back to her time. And he's irritated, right? Because she's clearly referenced already and then references again Starfleet. And he's like, I've never heard of this Starfleet thing you're talking about. He's like, I'm captain of a United Earth or I'm a captain in the United Earth Fleet. So in the mirror episodes, we do know that humanity becomes a bit xenophobic,
Mhm.
right? That the humans are like, nope, we don't need anybody's help. We're not aligning with anybody. Like, we're gonna go out and do things. I believe it's in Enterprise Mirror in a Mirror Darkly, right? Where humans are actually like torturing aliens and stuff because
Yeah.
I mean the humans are vicious. You know, you have Trip with his nasty scar over his eye and everything, and things are vastly different there. And so that was interesting. And so you see some similarities between what's being referenced now and what appears to be an alternate timeline. Well, not appears to, it is. And what we have seen in other mirror episodes, right? In
Yeah.
Star Trek. So he grabs her wrist and like he's going to try to grab her and keep her from, getting away. And then as soon as they lock wrists, she's able to push the button on the device and whoosh, they disappear and they end up somewhere else. And we learn very quickly that somewhere else is Earth.
Earth.
Back in 2024, because of course we can't travel to a different time period. It's got to be within a year of the current time. I guess it just makes it easier maybe to film. I don't really know, but
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
we
And
learned.
yeah, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say we learned that they go back to 2024 and they're apparently in Toronto, in what used to be known as Canada on Earth.
Yeah, and Kirk thought it was New York
Yeah,
at first, right? He's like,
yeah,
oh, and he starts off, right? He says, "Oh, I think this must be like New York." And you could kind of see in the back of Leon's mind, she's thinking, oh, this guy, he doesn't know.
exactly.
Right?
And we don't know why he doesn't know. Like Kirk, like you don't know what New York looks like versus somewhere else. I mean, but when we learn why that is in a few moments, but Leon, they're in this like alleyway, and Leon mentions to him, there's going to be an attack that's going to change the course of the timeline. They have to stop it. Now, I'm assuming that this attack is what is the starting point to what eventually makes the timeline go skew and
Yeah.
eventually creates the alternate timeline where we have Captain Kirk as part of the United Earth Fleet.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back a little bit to something that kind of stood out to me. It was just a really quick moment, but you said when it was interesting when Captain Kirk grabbed Leon's wrist, right? Leon's saying, "Hey, I got this device," and then Kirk, it was just a real quick grab, and it went grab, and I thought when I watched that, I thought, well, that was awkward, or it felt really, really, really awkward and sudden, and
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I was like, did he just really do that? And it was just, I mean, I really
Well,
like the
it's a
chemistry.
different Kirk, right?
It is a
So,
different Kirk, yeah.
although in Toss he had no problem grabbing onto the green women and pulling them in for a kiss too.
That's
So,
right.
you know,
Yeah. Because it was such of a bold move. Like I couldn't see Pike like doing the same thing or Spock doing the same thing. But Kirk's like there and he's like, grab the quick grab right there and then kind of set things into motion after that. They went back in
yeah,
time. Yeah.
I think that regardless of the timeline, Kirk still has a lot of similar qualities and tendencies. So it's you still recognize Kirk even though he's from a different timeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I did find this interesting, Chris. When they walk out, they kind of walk out into the city a little bit out of the alleyway, and there's a sign in the upper left hand corner, and we see it read. It has a picture of this bridge, right? And we see it read budget overruns on Lake Ontario Bridge, which
Mhm.
you don't know what that really means at first. It's just some background stuff, but that becomes an important note for a little bit later in the episode.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. I liked the I liked Toronto as the background and the scenery. I don't know if they've ever had. I'm just thinking through Star Trek, Toronto as the background in any of the cities.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, they use LA a lot because they used to film there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
So I'm assuming, are they filming in Toronto?
that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe they are. I guess I'm not sure. I do
Yeah.
know. I think they are because I'd heard Anson Mount, Captain Pike, make references to filming in Canada.
Yeah.
So it's possible they did. And I think that there's been a lot. I think Star Trek Discovery primarily films in Canada,
Mhm.
in Vancouver. So I don't know if it's just cheaper to film up there or whatever, but I do believe there's been a lot of filming in Canada lately when it comes to some of these Star Trek series.
Oh, maybe you're right. I remember a conversation we had with Jenny where I believe it was with Jenny Johnson where
Yeah.
she mentioned some filming in Canada for the
Yeah.
Star Trek series. So
So it's
yeah.
very possible that they did actually film in Toronto, or they filmed somewhere and said it was Toronto, but maybe it was in
Mhm.
Canada somewhere. So
Yeah.
because they do use Canadian money, or I'm assuming it's Canadian money in this episode.
They do, and we get to see the Canadian money prominently when they're doing the chess tournament. When
Yeah,
Kirk is doing a chess tournament and cleaning that up.
exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Chris, they come out of the alleyway into this open space, and I love the line where Leon's like, "This is Toronto, maple leaves, politeness, poutine."
Yeah.
Nice little reference there to some Canadian food, basically French fries with gravy and some other
Yeah.
toppings on it. And then, but what's interesting I found is that in this alternate timeline, this is different though than the toss mirror, right? Because
Mhm.
well, at least as far as we know, because I don't think it's mentioned in the episode. But and if by the way, if you haven't watched our deep dive or our spotlight episode on Star Trek the original series Mirror, be sure to go back and listen to that or watch that. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to check that out. We did a fun, awesome, real deep dive into that episode. But in this one, he mentions he's never even been to Earth. He was born in space on the USS Iowa. Shocker, right?
Right.
Because he's supposed to be from Iowa, so there's a little bit of a little bit of a play there. And he says that his Earth isn't anything like this. He mentions that it was a battleground, I think, for a while, and then occupied territory, and then a war. So it's very clear that whatever events or whatever attack happens here must be tied somehow to his Earth going awry and things happening differently and all that stuff. So it's very evident that the timeline for him is vastly different than Leon's timeline. Her Earth is different. I mean, there's so many things different. And then that's where we see Leon and Kirk realize, hey, we gotta get out of these uniforms and blend in. And they head to this like retail clothing store.
Yeah. Which was pretty funny that they went into the clothing store, had to get into this change of clothes, these cool clothes. They're pretty cool and contemporary. And they come out looking the same, right? They've chosen like the same clothes and they look like twinsies. So
Yeah,
that was pretty funny.
that was.
Yeah. And then they realize this is what I did not understand this too. After they have gotten all these clothes and they've decided what they want to wear, then they realize, oh, I think we have to pay.
Well, I mean, if you're born into a society where there's no money, right? Then I guess maybe that would be kind of a foreign thing, right?
Yeah, it would be.
You
And
don't
that's
just go to the replicator and replicate yourself some new clothes. You got to go in and you have to pay with money that you've gotten from working, and it's a very foreign concept. I guess.
it is. So Pelia's comment at the beginning of the episode where she's saying, "Oh, as soon as you guys, how long is this utopia with no money gonna last?" Is kind of foreshadowing, right? Because then they're back and like, oh, they don't have any money and they don't have any money to pay for these clothes. So, Leon kind of does some mischievous things right there and figures out
Yeah,
how to
think
get past.
she drops a wallet into some lady's purse and it buzzes off the security alarm, and then they kind of sneak their way out.
She totally does. So
Yeah,
the poor lady that had the that item put into her purse is now going to be in trouble with the law.
yeah. Hey, they had to save the future of humanity here, Chris. What is one little bit of, shoplifting thing going on here that, in retrospect to saving humanity,
Yes, that is
or at least
that's
the timeline?
you're
Yeah.
right. That is the correct. I guess that is the good ethical perspective. The good of the many outweighs the good of the few or the one.
That's what we're told. That's what unless you're the one.
That's right. The one that got framed for shoplifting. So
Right.
yeah. So that that was good. And then so after that, right, then they realized, oh, I think we're gonna need some money. So they find some outdoor chess places to play chess, and Kirk likes it. That's Kirk's thing. And so we get to see this montage of Kirk defeating a whole bunch of people at chess for money. And he impresses Leon, I think. And he says, hey, you didn't think I was the type of person to think 5 steps ahead, which I thought was a cute line.
Yeah.
And he does reference like, hey, this two-dimensional chess is for idiots. And
That line was
yeah,
hilarious.
they really need like three-dimensional chess. So
Yeah.
I liked that cute montage. You get to get a little bit of his personality and see the brilliance of Kirk. So that's
Right.
nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. What did you think about the scene? Because I think after that it was kind of abrupt. I felt abrupt, and I want to get your thoughts. But so I guess they got enough money where they could get a hotel room.
Yeah.
So
And
they're
hot dogs too.
and hot. Oh, that's right, and hot dogs.
Yeah.
And so that's where that's right. They get to know each other a little bit through the hot dogs, and Kirk's
Yeah.
kind of I like that. And Kirk says, "Hey, you got to enjoy the hot dogs."
Yeah, and then I thought kind of a touching moment where he's just staring off at the sunset. And she's like, you never seen a sunset before or whatever?" And he's like, "Well, not really. More like clouds of ash and or in underground tunnels where you can't see the sun." Like he paints a very grim picture of the future of where what he's. I mean, he was born in space. He's lived in space. Never even been to Earth. Humanity kind of got away from Earth and ran off to Mars and the moon and different places like that. And so it's a very grim reality. This idea of kind of a war torn future. And he's a warrior, right? He's someone who's got to lead the charge and being leading troops into battle and so forth. Very, very, very different dystopian future versus the utopian future that Leon comes from.
Thank you for reminding me of that. What I liked about Kirk was this is kind of central to his character, but despite all that, in this version of Kirk that we see, he was not a bitter person at all. It seemed right. He didn't come across as bitter to me. He was trying to savor the moments. He went back in time. He was savoring the moments and was appreciating Earth into being able to be on it. And so I liked that about him. And then him having that perspective, being able to point out to Leon to say, "Hey, enjoy this, while you can," because essentially, he didn't have this kind of privilege to enjoy. So yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. So I thought that was a good quality that I
Yeah.
observed. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, he does make an impact on Leon because when later that night when they're at the hotel, we see Leon kind of wake up, and I don't know if remember it was in the morning or the middle of the night, but she's observing him while he sleeps, and so clearly like she's got things on her mind and starting to develop feelings, and I'm sure he has probably had a good effect on her. So
Yeah, that
this
was
is
an
she's
awkward
struggling with.
moment. That was an awkward moment. Like she gets out of bed and just like kind of creepily watches him while he sleeps. I don't know. I mean, to me, I kind of feel like that scene should have been cut. I don't know. I don't know what it adds other than her, I guess it looked like she wanted to approach him and talk to him and wake him up and talk to him, but she didn't. I don't know. It just it felt kind of it felt very out of place actually to me.
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting. And Leon's a character like she obviously has difficulty relating to people just because of her background.
Yeah.
So we'll see what becomes of it. We'll see more. I will say that um would feel better if there were differences later on in the episode. If later on in the episode things had been different, then I would feel better about that hotel scene. But the way the episode played out, we'll talk about it in a little bit. I feel like it was I don't know how to feel. I don't know how to. I don't know how to feel about it.
You're not the
But
only one, Chris.
right, yeah, I'm sure we'll definitely talk about that, and it'll be good. So, but in that the next morning, they're talking about the different timelines, changing the timelines, temporal mechanics, which timeline needs to be restored essentially, and kind of
Yeah.
having this discussion, because essentially Kirk is saying to her, hey, he's essentially going to be wiped from existence if we go forward with her plan and helping her, and like his best course of action is really to do nothing, because you know he doesn't necessarily want to be wiped from existence. Her perspective was like, Earth, we still have Earth. It's so great. We've got this federation, and we're united, and it's this utopia, and we've got people as people and different species as part of the federation. And then his is, I think, almost equally compelling, because he says, "Hey, we have humanity has endured with its struggles, and now we've populated the solar system, and we're on Europa, and we're on Mars, and we're on these other planets, and so it's not like his version of humanity and his timeline hasn't accomplished something great either, right? So he's got a very compelling and valid point.
Yeah, he does. He does. But it's definitely an ethical dilemma because for all he knows, he doesn't exist in her timeline, right? And then she has to say, well, no, actually you do exist. And I did like her point where she says, you know, he's talking about kind of like being a warrior and all this kind of stuff, right? And she's like, but don't you want to be wouldn't you rather be an explorer?
Yeah.
You know, referencing the idea that they're at peace, at least the Federation as a whole, right? They're supposed to be a peacekeeping organization, although we know better. They're not always that way, right? They kind of project an image of, hey, come join the Federation. Everything's great and there's no issues, and it's not exactly that case.
Hmm.
But yeah, you made some good points there, Chris. That this idea of it's a temporal thing, but it's an ethical debate because if you think about it, right, from the outsider's perspective, why does Leon's timeline? Why should Leon's timeline get more emphasis, or why should her timeline exist over his? Right? Who says, like he says who? According to who? According to who your timeline is the right one? Maybe your timeline's the wrong one and mine's the right one, and just it screws with your head. Let me tell you that right now. But
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to bring some Star Wars into this
go for it.
little bit, where like in Empire Strikes Back,
We're crossing the streams, Doug.
we
We're
are.
crossing the
I
streams.
know. But this is because we love Yoda. So Yoda is so wise and has so much knowledge to give all of us. But
Wait,
when
wait, 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 wait. You're talking about Yoda. Are we going to get a Yoda impression?
I'm not ready for that.
Okay, maybe another time. Maybe another
Yeah.
time. Chris does a really good Yoda impression. So
Oh,
if you want to hear it, leave us a comment down in the comments
oh,
below, or send us a message and
oh.
tell us you want to hear it for another episode. That's right, Chris. Hey, we're gonna be doing an episode by episode review of Ahsoka, so maybe we'll get some Yoda impressions during Ahsoka.
Maybe. Yeah. So
Come on, as soon as you mentioned Yoda, you
oh,
knew I had to say that, right? Come on.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, Luke wants to go like help his friends and leave training, and Yoda says, "No, if you leave, you're going to um that that kind of erases all of the suffering that they've gone through, right? Then what will that have meant?" So Kirk's point in this version of Kirk, he's like, "Hey, our Earth is in such bad shape, but we've endured all that. We've endured our own suffering, and we've made these accomplishments, so that, which is a beautiful thing when you look at it, for humanity or individuals to go through that much suffering and come out on the other end, um, successful or better. So ethical dilemma there, right? Do you discount like all of that and say no, despite the suffering in your timeline and what you had to endure to get past it, this other timeline, we need to have.
Yeah.
and not. Oh
Why?
my
Why
god!
she is? Yes. My Yoda impression is not very good.
Oh,
Why is Chrissy is? Yes. Okay, sorry. Anyways, back to the lecture at hand here. But yeah,
no. I surprised you when I did that Yoda impression. I know that came
the
out of
first
nowhere when
time
I
you
did it.
did it, I was taken aback. I thought you were playing a recording of something. I was like, wait, what was that? Anyways, yeah, so they're in this hotel room, they're going through this ethical and temporal dilemma, and then all of a sudden the bridge outside the window explodes,
Yeah,
which references back to that image we saw right when they first come into kind of some of the city limits,
yeah,
and we see up on that, I don't think it's not a billboard, it looks like a video, a massive video screen, and it says that the bridge is over budget and everything else, and that bridge is the one that explodes. And then you hear Leon go, he's something effective like, oh, he said get to the bridge. So now she's connecting the dots. Bridge wasn't the bridge of the ship, the bridge was this bridge in the past.
yeah,
Right. And when we get to from there, we then cut to Kirk and Leon are showing up at the scene, right outside of, not exactly at the bridge, but outside of it, because the bridge is going across water. Wait, is that redundant? Bridges go over land too. I guess
yeah,
it's not redundant.
yeah.
So they come up to the scene, and they're kind of looking at what's going on and kind of taking an eye of things. And they meet a woman taking pictures, and she's important later. And they discover, or at least Leon discovers, that the burn marks on the bridge are consistent with a photonic bomb.
Yeah.
And that technology is not supposed to exist for another 100 years or so, she says. So they begin trying to look. They know that they're okay. We got to look for this time traveling assassin, is kind of what they think they call it. And they end up stealing a Dodge Challenger. I don't know if it's a Hellcat or not, but this cherry red Dodge Challenger, which I'm
Beautiful.
like, beautiful car, a little bit out of place. But did you notice though, Chris, the references as Kirk's getting into the car, he references a Denobulan prison, so we get an Enterprise reference.
Oh,
The
yes.
difference is the Denobulans aren't, partnering with the Federation, right? The Denobulans are an alien species that they're not
Yeah,
in alliance with the humans. So he references the Denobulan prison and Plomic soup, another
yeah,
reference.
yeah. And he says something like, I know how to make plomic soup in a toilet, or I can make it in a
Yeah,
toilet. Did he say
yeah, in a
something like
toilet.
that?
Yeah. I thought that was hilarious. He's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I learned how to make Plomic soup in a toilet or something like that. It was good. So it's cool to see an Enterprise reference. I think that was great. And we learned very quickly. Obviously, Kirk doesn't know how to drive a car. I mean, why would he really?
Yeah.
I mean, and so especially because he's born in space, they're not driving cars around in space, right?
I enjoy those
Um,
moments where they're trying to figure out how to drive. Those are cute.
yeah. But here's the thing, though. Okay, so he goes from not having a clue on how to even start the car to all of a sudden now he can do these quick turns and all this like car chase scenes. I'm like, I know he's a fast learner. It's Kirk, but that was a bit of a stretch for me.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden now you're just and in snowy, probably cold, semi icy conditions, he's just weaving and bobbing through traffic. That was a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Yeah, it
So
was. The suspension of disbelief is high there. Must be
yeah,
high.
I think so. I know it's Kirk, but okay, let's not be too ridiculous here. So then that's when they take the car and they start chasing after the van that they saw that piece of the burnt bridge put into.
Yeah. And then they are eventually, right? They chase the van. They're stopped by the police, which I thought was pretty funny in itself too, to see them pulled over and stopped by the police and like questioned. And so that was pretty interesting. And then the woman, I think is it the same woman? I think it's
Yeah,
the same woman, right?
same woman. Yep.
Yeah, she starts calling out the police and saying, "Hey, you really doing that to that civil rights lawyer or that prominent civil rights lawyer," and calling them out. So I the police kind of gave up kind of easily, I thought, after, it was like
Yeah.
just a few seconds of calling them out, and then all of a sudden they just stop.
Yeah, one woman with a cell phone camera, and she's just saying stuff, and all of a sudden like, oh, Okay, so you're free to go. That to me, I think, was one of my least favorite parts of the episode. I just felt like they're making the police look like idiots and cowards.
Yeah, because they're not going to do that.
I mean, it's not like he was just speeding for a little bit and then they pulled him over. This dude is weaving through traffic. He's like reckless driving. I mean, this is 2024. It's the future, right? 1 year in the future for us. In this day and age, come on. They're going to arrest him for that type of driving. They're not going to be afraid of some one person with a camera phone.
Yeah,
That to
absolutely.
me was really ridiculous. And like you said, the level of unbelievability and that was super high.
Yeah,
I did not like how they painted the picture of the police in that one.
yeah, I have to agree with you on that because they're not going to do that. So there
Yeah.
could have been other ways, you know,
Yeah.
could have been other ways they could have set up where they meet the lady, they meet the woman. Um, but oh well. So
I think it would have been cool maybe if like because we learn about other stuff that I know you'll get into in a second, but
mhm.
like what if Kirk got taken to jail, right? He's not going to be going to like prison, but he goes to like, county jail or something like that. And then Leon shows up to get him out and she finds that the woman's also in there for doing something, right? Protesting or, she got herself into trouble. And that's how she starts telling him this stuff in there. To me, that would be
Yeah,
way more believable, right? Maybe she
yeah,
was taking pictures she shouldn't have, but in that bridge scene, they confiscated her camera, took her off to put her in a jail for a night or whatever, something like that. But the way that whole scene played out, I was not a fan of.
yeah, agreed. So they get to know the woman. I think they go to a coffee shop or somewhere, and the woman starts explaining like who she is and all of her conspiracy theories, and essentially like, hey, there's aliens up there, and they're trying to like do bad things to us. And it was funny, like seeing Kirk's and Leon's kind of expression on that, and then Kirk says something. What did he say? He's like, "Yeah, my wife was abducted."
Oh yeah, he calls
Yeah,
Leon his wife, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, she was abducted." And Leon's like, yeah, I'm his wife, like
yeah,
just completely caught off guard. And after that scene in the hotel where she was weirdly staring at him, you're like, oh, she's probably feels a little awkward because she's maybe starting to have feelings for him. And now he's
hmm
calling her his wife. And yeah,
yeah. I was That part was kind of cute. That was
yeah.
kind of cute. So they do in one of the pictures that lady has. She has a Romulan bird of prey, and then it's kind of funny because Kirk and Leon are thinking, "Oh, she's not really crazy. She's actually, she actually knows the truth."
Yeah. And this is a toss Romulan ship, the same
Yeah,
kind of ship we would have seen in Balance of Terror.
that's right. The
So I thought that
classic
was
one.
awesome to have that classic bird of prey. I
Yep.
mean, it didn't have the bird of prey like, painted underneath the bottom side like you've seen, but that image, that ship design is very, very iconic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. So they end up finding Pelia again because they realize they have to get someone with knowledge of engineering so they can figure out like what is going on, and kind of circles back to the beginning of the episode where Pelia is saying, "Hey, I was part of the archaeology department,
Yeah.
something like
I
that,
used to
right?
work there.
Used to work there." And then Leon goes, "Oh, I know where there is an engineer." And so they go to Vermont, they find Pelia, and we have kind of the I guess they're kind of a typical exchanges with Pelia now when they meet her again, which was cute. All of the scene was cute where Leon explains, "Hey, we know about you, we know your secret, um, and we need your help." And then when Leon says, we need an engineer," and Pelia kind of looks at her and says, "Why do you think I'm an engineer?" So that was great. And so we figure out, at least I felt like, oh, she hasn't even embarked on her engineering training yet. She hasn't done any of that. So because she's got such a long lifespan, so she doesn't need to.
Right.
So yeah, that was fun, and we get to see. They find the diver's watch, which has the was it tritium because they need to find the fusion device. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah. Which is kind of um, I think a long shot where they would be able to get this diver's watch, and use the tritium in the diver's watch to go find where this
You'd have
fusion
to
device.
walk. I feel like you'd have to walk really closely and have a really good idea to know where this cold fusion device is.
Yeah,
Right? If you're not close enough to it, I wouldn't think it would glow. So you'd be like literally walking around like almost like a needle in a haystack. I mean, it's not like Toronto's small; it's a big city.
yeah, yeah. I think it was a stretch.
Yeah,
Would have been
probably
easy.
a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. Because they say, hey, this would be no problem if we had a tricorder. I think they said that earlier,
Yeah,
which they
yeah,
don't. So they're
right.
using a diver's watch as a tricorder essentially.
I, I hope I'm not the only one when uh Palia opens up the door after they're knocking on it or whatever, and waiting for Billy Crystal to come out and her to go, "I'm not a witch, I'm your wife," from Princess Bride.
Oh, I had it. Yeah, you are not, because I had that same sense too, like the Princess Bride kind of sense right there when
Yeah,
she opened the
that door.
door.
Have fun storming the castle, boys. Yeah,
Yeah,
I just yeah. There's a part of me is like, where's Billy Crystal at? She needs to say she's not a witch. She's his wife. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we do have later after that we have Leon and Kirk walking around the streets of beautiful Toronto, and they have a romantic moment over there. What did you feel?
Oh, yuck. But here's why:
Yeah,
because she's my favorite character, and she needs to stay away from Kirk. He gets
gotcha.
all the ladies, and I don't want her heart to get broken. So stay away from Kirk. It's not going to end well. I don't think it's going to end well for a lady if you're going to, go after Kirk. So yeah,
You're right. Yeah.
I wasn't a fan of that. I'm a little jealous, but anyways, I think that no, in all honesty, I just kind of feel like it was so rushed, right? Like they meet on the bridge, right? When she zaps into their timeline, into their alternate universe. They talk. They get zapped off to the past. They go get clothes, and they look like he has to change because it's the same outfit, and then she kind of catches a glance and she gets kind of flustered.
Mhm.
She's obviously attracted to him. I mean, Kirk is a handsome guy, right?
Mhm.
So, and then just the way it plays out, and then she has this awkward moment in the hotel where she's kind of staring at him while he's sleeping. I don't know. To me, it just felt, and I just didn't feel really natural, like the natural course of things. It felt so rushed. I kind of feel like they could have done without it.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Honestly, I feel like they could have done without the whole, romantic feelings of any kind between the two characters, and they still could have accomplished the same thing.
Yeah, and maybe it didn't even need to be Kirk to go back.
Yeah, well,
You know,
that's a whole nother thing.
because
I would have liked to have actually seen a different main character go back and be, have a different. But I understand why. There's a fair amount tied in because of Kirk being a captain. There's a lot more tied to him being able to talk about the differences, right, of like the way the world is, and him being part of the United Earth Fleet. And so I get it from that perspective. Yeah. And then with how they tied it at the end,
yeah,
I get it. But yeah, I agree with you, Chris. They could have done without Kirk too, I think.
yeah, yeah. They could have changed a lot in this particular episode.
Kirk's had more screen time in season 2 than Pike has.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
Hmm.
Pike's been on screen for like 10 minutes total this season.
Yeah, you might be pretty close to accurate on that. Yeah. Well, so the next part is the part this scene that really it bothers me a lot. So when they do go into that building and they're, yeah, I think the title of some of the rooms are like genetic laboratory. There's genetics room, and then Leon realizes, hey, she can actually access and get into these spaces, but then they're held up by gunpoint by the same lady who we learn is not human but Romulan.
Yeah.
Um, she holds them at gunpoint, threatens them, wants her to open the door. Um, Kirk, is shows some courage and shows some bravery and then says some words and then she shoots him
Yeah.
and he dies. And so my wife and I were watching it at this time and we look at each other.
Oh, your wife was watched this episode. Nice.
Yeah. And and she says, I said, that was pretty lame. And today she said that I need to say that she said it was dumb. Like that part. She didn't like that part at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Um yeah,
They've killed Kirk off twice in Star Trek now, right? This one and
yeah,
then Star Generations. And both times Kirk died was stupid.
yeah. And
I mean, some
I do. Yeah.
random planet in Star Trek Generations and Viridian 3 dies fighting against Soren, right? And falls off the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one, he gets shot by a gun because he says, try me or whatever. Like, I'm not bluffing, try me, something like that. And over talking about if you fire, it's going to set off the building alarm. Like, yeah, that to me was, yeah, I'm there with you.
It felt so meaningless. Like
Yeah.
like
Like they built all this up between her and Kirk and then just like that. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. A- And I get it that it's an alternate timeline version of Kirk. And I get it that if they're gonna try and restore the timeline of Leon that she's in, then something would have to happen to him. Right?
Right.
Either he would be fade out of existence or whatnot or whatever. I mean, but I felt like that could have been handled differently or it just didn't need to be meaningless. And at least with Generations, he was at least with Picard actively fighting. I mean, he was trying, he was fighting on
Yeah. Yeah.
Viridian.
Picard
Yeah.
and Kirk, tag team to
Uh,
try to defeat Soren.
yeah. So at least there was that. But here I felt like, okay, and that was it. Just shot and then that was it. And then I don't. I felt that for me, it just didn't feel right for the
Yeah.
episode at all. I felt like why even have him in the episode?
Yeah. That's
So
true. You're
yeah,
not wrong. Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting, Chris. When they go inside the I think it's the second door. No, it's
mhm,
the first door they go in, right? And she gets them in and they see on the wall Noonien Singh Institute for Cultural Advancement.
yeah,
And so I think, Leon determines that her lineage may help get them in. And of course it does. And this is where I think she makes that comment about, something about a genetic marker, like, well, my genetic marker or something like that, will this work? And then it does or something. And then, yeah, once they get inside, Kirk's killed. There's that assassin, and then Kirk dies, and then she grabs Leon and then I think, forces her hand onto the scanner. They get inside this second door. She gets her down a hallway, and then Leon sees this door, this third door, right? That she wants her to open, and she notices there's a name tag on it, and it looks like it's written by a child,
yeah.
and it's written Khan. And as soon as I saw the Noonien Singh Institute for Cultural Advancement on the wall, I instantly thought, okay, where's Khan?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Where are we going to see Khan or a reference to Khan? And this was interesting. She wanted to open the door. The Romulan assassin wanted her to open the door because it was evident that she wanted to kill Khan. If we
Yeah.
were assuming at the time that when I saw that, I was like, okay, so this is written weird. And then as they're talking, I'm like, it looked like it was written like a kid. So are they saying that Khan's a kid? But to me, it didn't make any sense because there hasn't been anything that I'm aware of in the new Trek that would have changed Khan and his thugs from rising to power in the 90s. We're in 2024. Why would Khan be a kid? Khan rose to power in the 90s. He wouldn't be a kid in 2024. In fact, in 2024, I believe he would he would be on the Botany Bay off in space in the sleeper ship along with the people that tried to rise up. Right? They ended up
Yeah,
defeating him. If you go back and read,
yeah.
the history, that would be the case. That's in the Star Trek Encyclopedia. It was on Memory Alpha, I'm sure. Uh, and so I found that very interesting. And she begins to connect the dots that what's inside there might be her mass murdering ancestor, the one and only. And I found the explanation as to why this Romulan assassin was doing it a bit underwhelming. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's this computer simulation that makes changes at the time, allows us to see different changes to the timelines, and we're trying to find a way to basically get rid of our biggest adversary, the Federation, right, and to keep the Federation from becoming a thing, which, from a Romulan perspective, makes sense, right? But did you have the thought that I had, where this felt a heck of a lot like Year of Hell, where he's constantly changing the timeline, trying to figure out the best possible way to bring their
Yeah.
I instantly
Had that
thought that, where
idea.
the Romulans
Okay.
have this computer where they're trying to make these, and it's telling them how to make these changes in order to make an end result happen. I instantly thought of Year of Hell from Voyager
Yeah.
with the Crenum Imperium.
That's right. And if the Romulans now have this ability or technology in order to do that, what's to stop them from, like Krenin, what's to stop them just from trying it all the time now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Because that was just one agent.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's a really good point, actually. Um, so yeah, using this computer simulation to change a timeline, and this is kind of what popped out, I guess, in the computer. Um, she references the temporal wars,
Yeah.
which I thought was cool. And she did mention that this was all supposed to have happened, 1990s, 92, I think she said, like, this is all supposed to have already been kind of a thing. So that makes me wonder then, well, what changed for Khan to now be a kid in 2024, a young kid, versus rising to power in the 90s? That's where I'm like, okay, something's missing here. I'm missing something, either from a previous episode of Strange New World or something else. I mean, we know, right, that the new Trek is kind of its own timeline, right, from Legacy Trek, or the original 5 series is. Um, but this, to me, Chris, this scene here, to me, even though I know she's in the past and everything, this to me is a piece of the answer to one of my expectations
Hmm.
for the season. And we talked about this, I think, when we did our episode 1 review. And if you haven't watched it or listened, go back and do that now, after you're done with this. But I don't know if you remember that we kind of talked about, we reviewed the first episode. We said, okay, what are our expectations, or what are we hoping for the rest of this season, right? And one of them for me was, I hope we start diving into Leon's past and her ties to Khan
Yes.
and how this came about. This doesn't answer everything for me, but this is definitely a start. And she confronts her past. She confronts the idea of being tied to Khan, this, and genocide and torture, and how it fits into her. And I love that she says, Khan Noonien Singh and Khan, he was in genocide and torture, and it's her, and she almost like she stands up and goes, I am Leon Noonien Singh.
Hmm. Hmm.
And all of this. To me, this is a turning point, I think, for her, overcoming the weight of her ancestry. We all, I'm sure, have ancestors in our past that have done terrible things. It's just part of human nature. And if we knew about some of the things our ancestors did, we might feel the same way she does. And so I think I think for me, it would be easy for many people to relate to Leon, because she is kind of heartbroken and frustrated, mad that she is tied back to such a terrible person.
I think a lot.
Um,
Yeah. I I think a lot of people can relate to that. And what you said is beautiful, Zach, because you lay. through this, Leon is recognizing that, hey, she's her own individual. Right?
Yeah.
So she is not defined by the actions of her the and that her the actions that her ancestors have done in the past. She can make her own decisions. She can craft her own fate, craft her own destiny of like who she wants to be, like as a person. I think that is a excellent way to kind of look at this scenario, and Leon kind of realizing I I can be my own person, and I can,
Yeah.
yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. And so interesting. They pan to see. So she kills the Romulan assassin,
Yeah.
right? She beats her up and then gets the gun and shoots her, and she like disappears. I don't know exactly what happened where she shot falls on the ground and then all of a sudden just turns into nothing, ashes and
Oh yeah, I thought it was like it was some sort of version of their own suicide cyanide pill.
oh maybe that's what it was then. Yeah,
Like,
it was so
yeah.
fast I didn't catch it. I'd have to go back and like slow it down and frame by frame, whatever. But so then Leon decides that she's going to enter the room and she's
Hmm.
looking around and this young boy is in there. Now I will say, whoever that young boy was they cast, I thought was really good because I looked at him and I was like, yeah, I could see him being a young Khan. Like he had the look of a young Khan and tied to Ricardo Montalban.
Oh,
Like I
okay.
thought I thought if you go back and look physically, I could very much buy the fact that he was a young Khan.
Okay.
He only had a couple lines, I realized that, but just physically, he had the look. Um, and so we also get an image. She's sitting on the bed with him and wiping his tears, which is a very humbling moment, I think, would be for her, right? Because she knows who this kid is supposed to become. And we see a picture on the wall, and it's him with a bunch of other kids. And I believe that would be him with the other, you know, genetically modified
Hmm.
people that would rise up to eventually, kill and create genocide and torture and do terrible, unspeakable things. And she knows this. And this line that she says really caught me where he says something and I don't remember exactly what it is, but then she says, this doesn't make any sense right now, but you are right. You are right where you need to be. And she knows what that means. Like she realizes that she's literally aiding Khan and creating a terrible future, near future that will eventually lead back to her future, the future she knows she's a part of. She realizes what this kid's going to grow up to be. And the look on her face that just kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. That look she has in her face as she's walking out of the room, knowing exactly what she's leaving behind. Like the dilemma of if I were to kill this kid right now, I wouldn't exist. Right.
Hmm.
And I would also stop mass genocide and everything else. But if I do kill him, then the future that I know doesn't exist and I may not exist either. So it's like it's that back to the future dilemma,
Hmm.
right? Where when Marty messes up his parents' meeting, he almost doesn't exist. He has to correct everything, get him to fall in love. This is kind of similar in that regard that she's at a fork in the road where she could save millions and millions of lives, but that would completely destroy the timeline that she's from. So I'm curious on your thoughts from this particular moment.
That is a very I mean, no individual has had to, I don't, has had to deal with that. It's a very heavy concept for anyone to deal with. Right. And so, and Leon's character is someone that would kind of think in those terms, like, hey, I am making like this decision, because preserving Khan's life at this moment is going to set in motion a series of events that will, have the creation of humanity going to the stars and Federation and this utopia, like we said earlier. But she realizes that, through that action, like you said, through that decision, there is a tremendous amount of tragedy and millions of lives that are going to be lost through that decision.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we see her break down at the end of the episode, just emotionally like torn up about it. We see her talk to that other temporal agent later and say what, I can't even talk to anyone about this,
Yeah.
because then because she's will be carrying that kind of decision forever, like um but for her, maybe at least a glimmer of hope for Leon is she got to see the other side of it, at least not see the other side, but hear the other side of the potential timeline from Kirk
Yeah.
on, hey, the Earth was essentially, we destroyed the Earth. There is no Federation. We're kind of a xenophobic culture, and we're at war. So at the very least, we got to see Leon hear that from Kirk. So maybe she can take comfort, a little bit of comfort in that. Um, but you could see that. I that kind of thing is what would break people.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, if you relate it to our time,
yeah,
right? In our reality, it's like you go back in time to a period, I don't know what year it would be, where Hitler's a kid in the same age as Khan, and you know exactly what he's going to turn into, and you have a chance to stop it, but you don't because the the effect on the future is far worse killing him than it would be to let him live. I mean,
hmm,
it's those ramifications. Like you're in that situation. Like, what would you do? Most people are going to say, "Oh, I'd kill him," right? You stop the genocide and everything that happened in World War II wouldn't have been a thing and all this stuff, But then, what if you knew the other part of it, where if you did do that, then it causes X, Y, and Z to happen as a domino, and then it's even worse. You know what I mean? Like it's that
yeah,
if you compare it to our time, it's it's a massive dilemma. I couldn't imagine Chris being in her shoes, right? Because not only is she a descendant of him, but she knows exactly what's going to happen. He's one of the biggest murdering genocidal people to ever live in the human. You could argue in Star Trek land, you could argue that he is the worst,
hmm,
perhaps
hmm,
worse than anybody who had lived before him
hmm,
and his group of augments, right? But man, what did yeah, oof. It'd be a really really tough thing to have to walk around with.
yeah. So I
Like
actually,
keep you
yeah,
up at night every night kind of a thing.
hmm, yeah. I kind of, it's an interesting idea, and I hope they bring that idea, this concept back in future episodes. I think it's a really great one to explore a little bit, because with that decision um comes a whole lot of different consequences, like
Yeah.
after that, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, you could look at it from the perspective of, in the Star Trek world, in the Star Trek universe, they're saying, I think their point is, at some point humanity has to experience the lowest depth that it can, so that it can realize so that it can face itself at the lowest, and then and rise from that, right? So
Yeah.
um the eugenics, maybe they're saying eugenics war was that, in the Star Trek world, eugenics war was that point in time. um and in the alternate timeline of Kirk that we see, maybe they hadn't ever experienced that low point yet.
It could be. I mean, they have the eugenics wars, and then a few decades later, well, I guess 5 decades later, 6 decades later, however, whatever
Mhm.
the math is. I'm not going to do public math here on camera. Um, they also have World War III, and they have to
Yeah,
rise out of
yeah,
those ashes. Like
yeah.
what in First Contact? What does Riker reference? Like 600 million dead or something like that. I don't remember the numbers compared to what happens during the eugenics wars with Khan, but there's a couple of moments. But even changing what happens with Khan could also have an effect on that, right? And then maybe
Hmm.
if they don't rise up from the eugenics wars, they never rise up from World War III. right?
Yeah.
And so World War III happens, and then so there's a fallout effect, right? There's this ripple effect in time, and I think that's in Year of Hell, the Voyager two-parter that we love.
Yeah.
You see that, right? The discussion about these ripple effects. Well, we did this, and that affected this, and this, but we didn't see this happening. Now we have to go change this, and then this is going to have this, and it's just this like just endless number of things that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's a good point.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so it's a very heavy moment, I think. And then that happens. She walks away, and she ends up returning to Enterprise again.
Yep. And I think she goes to the bridge in her street clothes, right? So in her
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
street clothes, and she's people turn to look at her and are asking her like what she's doing, and she's out of uniform, and she's like, "Oh, I'm just checking to make sure everything's all right," which is great. And she returns to her quarters, and in her quarters, I think she's met by another temporal agent right there, and the temporal agent kind of gives her explains to her what she has to do, and she's got to keep everything a secret. And the temporal agent has acknowledged that Leon has completed the mission. And so that was great. And is this the we see temporal agents here? We see them, I believe, in DS9 too, and maybe it's kind of a circular thing there. I don't think we've seen them in many episodes.
no. DS9 is the first time that the Department of Temporal Mechanics is referenced, right? I believe the
Uh,
first time it's referenced is after Cisco and them get back from in Trials and Tribulations, right? Where
mhm.
Cisco and them return from Kirk's time period. That's and they want to figure out, make sure they didn't mess up and monkey anything. So it's a great DS9 reference. I love it. But we know, yeah, we noticed. I think you mentioned this, Chris, that they don't exist yet, right? In this time period, they don't exist yet. So we know that they're a future thing that happens. Um, because when Kirk comes, when Kirk time travels, right? Whether it's City on the Edge of Forever or whether it's in Star Trek 4, uh, there is no Department of Temporal Mechanics that comes knocking.
Right.
So, but yeah, it is a DS9 reference. I'm almost positive the first time we ever hear of the Department of Temporal Mechanics is in DS9.
You know what I'm thinking is like, why are they waiting so long to create the Department of Temporal Mechanics? Because everyone's going back in time all the time. Kirk goes back in time, Picard goes back in time, Janeway's gone back. All this time travel happens. They
Yeah.
need to form this department as soon as they can. They need to
Yeah.
get
Well,
this
the,
stuff back.
the department wouldn't be able to have reached Janeway, though, right? Because she's all the way out in no man's land out there in the Delta Quadrant. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Very good point. I, 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 I thought this line that Leon says to the temporal agent was really, really potent, where she says something to the effect of like, "You sent me back to protect a mass murderer. I had to kill to protect him." And then the temporal agent snaps back and is like, "Well, those events were never supposed to happen. You're never supposed to be aware of them."
Yeah.
So, what were your thoughts when she said that, Chris? When Leon says like, "You sent me back to protect a mass murderer," and that she had to kill to protect him. I think
Yeah.
you can hear the heaviness in her voice,
Yeah.
knowing what she had to do.
Yeah, you can. It's like where it's that idea where to do an ultimate good, you have to do these terrible things. And you know, part of that is some of those terrible things may be in Leon's case, she was killing people. And that also takes away a part of her, right? But that's to accomplish like an ultimate good. Um, so that's kind of what I think about when that phrase and that line is said, is the sacrifice, and sacrifice taking form in many different shapes. Like again, Leon's case, it was killing these people. Um, and that was kind of that sacrifices a bit of her soul and her conscience, right? In order to save like all to save her current timeline. Um, that concept is really big. That concept is really heavy. So
Yeah.
those are those are what come to my mind.
Huge moral dilemmas in this episode.
Yeah.
Huge moral dilemmas, like really, really big. And it weighs on Leon. I think, so the episode ends right with her sobbing on the bed, which is something we
Yes.
really haven't seen from her. She's pretty stoic. She's pretty, you know, even keel in the sense like she doesn't really show emotion too much other than maybe some anger. Um, but I think it's the realization of what she's done and the idea that she calls up Kirk to see if he's alive, right? And she checks in on him. He doesn't know who she is.
Yeah.
And she doesn't, he doesn't remember her or anything that happened or their kiss or their feelings or anything like that. So the feeling between that, I think, and what she did and what had to happen in order for the timeline to be restored just wrecked her, just straight up wrecked her. And so that was an emotional moment. Like I got, really sad to see her in that state. Um, because she was put in an unwinnable situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? You kill Khan, potentially wiping out your own existence, but then you then make your own timeline disappear potentially in favor of Kirk, the other Kirk's timeline, or you walk away. So the timeline restores, knowing full well by walking away and leaving him there, you're going to basically be a part of hundreds of millions of people dying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a, I mean, my goodness,
Leon
heavy, heavy.
already, yeah, it is heavy. Leon already feels um different and maybe isolated isn't the right word, but she she definitely feels different from the rest of the crew. Much more solitary. And you're right. She's very stoic. She's probably the type that uh has pride in like kind of her stoic personality and unflappable personality and being able to perform under pressure and being calm like that. So now having this knowledge that she has because she says to that temple agent, again, she says, I can't even talk to anyone about this. So that's going to
Yeah.
make her, it's going to make her feel like even more lonely, even more separated, even more distant from the crew. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out through the rest of this season because that would not be something anyone would want to carry with them, right? So
Yeah. And hopefully we get more resolution on that, right? And
yeah.
hopefully we get, because see, that's why I said earlier, where I said this answers some of it, some of
Mhm.
her history, right? It doesn't answer all of it. How, how is she a descendant? Where did that come from? How did that happen? How did, how did she become a descendant from Khan, who him and his cronies were kicked off Earth and sent off in a sleeper ship? Uh, did he have, you know, relations with different women and then they had I don't know. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
There's still a gap, a blank gap in there that hasn't been answered. And that's still what I'm waiting for.
Yeah, because it's not clear to me if she's his like great granddaughter.
I don't know.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
we
I don't
don't
know
know.
either. Yeah,
Yeah. So I would assume,
yeah.
again, another assumption I'm having is at
Hmm.
some point, either in this season or in a future season, they're going to get back to that. And we may not get it this season because there's probably so much they got to do. I mean, you think about it, the last two episodes, there's been a pretty good amount of Leon in those. And this one
Right,
she was the centerpiece of this episode,
right,
which
right.
I really appreciated quite a bit. So okay, this was a heavy one. This ended heavy, I should say. We got a lot, but what are some thoughts, Chris? Give me some of your overall thoughts from this episode as we wrap things up here.
Well, while we were talking about this episode, did you get the sense where it felt very much like Terminator? So,
Yeah.
you
Now that
know,
I think about it, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, a little bit, yeah.
yeah. So now Leon and Kirk, they're going back and they're the protagonists or the good guys, but then they got to find a place to change clothes. like just like in the first
Yeah.
Terminator. Um, and then you've got the Romulan agents sent back, and the Romulan agents sent back to kill Khan, essentially kill John Connor. That's based on a computer simulation like Skynet.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even think about all that, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and
That's a good point.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking this is Terminator.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that came to my mind as we were talking about this. And I don't know if it was intentional or what, but I'm thinking this is really like Terminator.
Yeah.
Um, I did like some of the funny moments and levity about it in in there, and learning about Kirk, and some of it was cute, like trying to go in through that revolving door and Kirk couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. I
Like,
was
okay,
born in space. Like,
yeah, yeah. So I liked the levity. I appreciated that. I really feel like something could have been different with Kirk. I mean, if yeah, either have Kirk's ending have been different, completely different, and they still could have had the same, feeling at the end, or just use someone else. Didn't have to be Kirk, uh,
yeah.
you know. But I, I didn't like, what happened with Kirk. So that was just my gut kind of reaction right now. Um, so I feel not so good about
No bueno.
no bueno about the episode. So unfortunately, but
Hmm.
I did enjoy Leon in it. So it's essentially a Terminator. It's an episode of Terminator, or a remake of Terminator, where Kirk dies.
I can see that. Yeah.
How about you, Zach?
Well, really quickly, I got to address this.
Yeah.
When Kirk comes on that call with her at the end, he's lieutenant.
Oh yes.
I thought he was a captain. Maybe I'm missing something. I thought he was already a captain at this point. I thought there was a moment in season 1 of Discovery where he is a captain, or not Discovery, of Strange New Worlds. Um, but but we talked about that balance of terror, homage, right, and quality of mercy, and I think that those events are a thing that could happen in the future, right? Where in this case, Pike isn't replaced Kirk. I'm confused. Maybe he is supposed to be a lieutenant at this time. His brother, I think, is also Lieutenant Sam. Um, Interesting that his actual first name is George. So George Samuel Kirk, right? George
Oh
Kirk, I
my
thought was supposed to be the name
goodness.
of Kirk's dad. So I guess he got Kirk's dad's name, and Kirk got his dad's. So Sam got his dad's first name, and he got his dad's middle name, Tiberius.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's how they're playing that off. But so very confused by that. Maybe I'm missing something, or I just forgot something, which is very possible.
No,
Um,
I had the immediate same reaction you did when when the comm came up and you said, "Hey, this is Lieutenant Kirk." I'm confused. I know
yeah,
I have to go back. I know there was some whole bunch of alternate timeline stuff that happened, um but I think that's an issue, right? Where we can't watch the episodes too many times over and over again. It does become an issue where we get confused. Um
yeah, no joke. Well, I
yeah.
mean, it. So if you guys know why that's the case, then please let us know because I would be curious. Um, yeah, another time travel alternate universe episode, which I know most Trekkies love. I know we're a fan of the time travel alternate universe episodes. I mean, we're doing a spotlight series on that, which we will come back to. But why 2024? Couldn't they have time travel back to the 90s and then
Hmm.
you know, kept that as Khan's rise, or maybe earlier than that, like when Khan's a kid, so it'd be maybe in the 80s or 70s, whenever it was. I know he's genetically engineered, but um it kind of bugs me that Khan's a small child in 2024. Like where excuse me, where did that change happen where he's now a small child?
Yeah.
Um I would have thought he'd been on the sleeper ship by now, but again, maybe I'm getting my timeline messed up. But the episode's all about Leon, so I love that.
Yeah.
We get to see more of her background as a descendant of Khan and meet a young Khan. I was a little bit torn on that at first, but I think I like it. We do get Khan. He's a kid, but you know, I think it's probably easier to do it that way than try to cast an older person to replicate Ricardo Montalban. So I think it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. They
But
will
yeah, that
never replicate Ricardo Montalban. No?
there's no chance.
Yeah.
No chance. I know Benedict Cumberbatch tried to be Khan in the Darkness movie, and he was okay, but no Ricardo Montalban.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I didn't like the kiss between Leon and Kirk. It just to me didn't feel like they had enough time to get to that point.
Yeah.
But then again, it's Kirk, right? Kirk is a ladies' man, and so he doesn't exactly need a lot of time, I guess.
He's very
Um,
charismatic.
yeah, I did love the funny connection with Palia to the past and the Department of Archaeology, like handwritten on the door, and like she ran out of space, so she
Yeah.
had to bring the word. That was funny, and that's where I was like, okay, is Billy Crystal coming out? Like, where's that whole thing? But to me, overall, the Romulan assassin really wasn't scary. I nothing against the actress who played her. I kind of felt like if they're gonna make a character for that, it should have been something where, she really terrifies them. I think to a point.
You're right about her. She wasn't scary. She was just better being the who we thought she was at the beginning before we realized she was a Romulan assassin.
Yeah,
Just, just
exactly.
being
Yeah.
a girl with conspiracy theories.
Yeah. So, and to me, I don't mind if things are different here and there, and we've seen that from the very beginning of Strange New Worlds. We know that this timeline, this new Trek timeline, is a little different. Things are different, and I'm okay with that. But there were things about this episode that bugged me that made too big of changes. In particular, Khan not rising to power when he did. What that does is that now pushes everything,
Mm-hmm.
which eventually is going to impact stuff in the future. Things are going to start happening much later than they should be. If Khan's not rising to power until like 3 decades later, does World War III still start on time, or does it start like there's a trickle down effect, right? That eventually impacts the Trek that we love the most, which is the legacy Star Trek stuff. So I didn't like the number of some of the changes, significant changes they made in the timeline in this episode.
Yeah, understand. Yeah, I
But
completely understand.
so overall, though, I thought it was a fun episode for the most part, with the time travel and the funny quips and some of the humor and stuff. But yeah, it left a little bit to be desired, I think. Um, so we'll see. We're about a third of the way through the season. I know it's 10 episodes of season 3, so it's not quite, the math doesn't quite add up, but we're about a third of the way through. So uh I don't know. I don't know for me if season 2 is quite hitting on all cylinders like I thought maybe it would. I don't know how you're feeling through 3 episodes. We're not talking about like giving any ratings or anything, but just maybe some real quick like feelings on the first third ish of the season.
Yeah, I maybe it's different than what I it's different than what I had in my mind, and of course that happens all the time. But maybe I thought they would be visiting new species or new planets,
Yeah.
but right now we've run into in the previous episodes Klingons, and this episode, Romulans and time travel again, um,
And Court.
and Court. That's right.
I saw so Amanda Rowe, I think's her name. She's the one that directed this episode and directed the episode in season 1, the Elysium episode, the one with like the crazy 8 costumes and stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought she said something on the Seventh Rule podcast recently with an interview about there was some changes to the schedule, and that I thought you correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there. I thought I heard her say that this was supposed to maybe be the season premiere episode, and
Oh,
that
okay.
they had to move some things around for scheduling, and so this episode got pushed to this. I think that's what it was, but don't quote me on that. So because I was a little surprised because the season premiere episode we got, the episode number 1, didn't feel like a season premiere. This to me would have felt like a season premiere episode.
Yeah.
I think it really would have, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
But episode 1 of this season felt more like something you'd kind of find in the middle of a season.
It did. Yeah, I agree.
So
Yeah,
be
we'll
curious to see
see.
where we go from here at this point.
Yeah, we will see. We will see. But we'll enjoy the next one, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But with that, we always appreciate everybody watching and listening to us here on the Random Redshirt podcast. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, and this is your first time, feel free to click our logo below if you're watching us on YouTube and go check out all the videos we have on there. Not all of our episodes are on YouTube, just the ones we've done on video so far. We did a lot of them on audio only in the beginning until we switched to doing video. And so check those out as well on your favorite podcast platforms. And also be sure to go on Facebook and Instagram and check us out there. Follow us, like us, whatever the verbiage is on that particular site. For all the latest news and notes and episode announcements and things. And we look forward to talking with you all again soon. Next weekend when we do our episode 4 review of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. But if you are watching this first, and it's Saturday when this thing comes out, we can't wait for you to watch the episode with Nana Visitor. We sat down with her. That's coming out on Sunday, July 2nd, 2023. So be sure to mark that page and come back to it and watch it because it's awesome. We had a blast and you're going to absolutely love the time we had with her.
Yep, absolutely. It was terrific.
Yeah, it really was. So thank you so much, as always, for watching all over the globe and the interwebs. We really do appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt podcast.